Hello, everyone. Guillaume Litzwell here, host of the E-commerce Wizards podcast, where I feature top leaders in e-commerce and business. Today's guest is Vinnie Fisher, CEO of Fully Accountable. He's a very accomplished entrepreneur. So he's built some 8-figure health company and almost 9-figure web hosting company called BrainHost. He's also the author of the CEO's Mindset book and another book called False Profits, which you see a copy in the back if you're in the video version of this podcast. And today we'll be talking about a few different topics, some very interesting things for sure. We'll start with what's the difference between regular accounting and e-commerce accounting for a merchant to be more successful, and how this can benefit an e-commerce business. And we'll be talking about a lot of other things for sure as well. So before we get started, we have two things. First, I want to give a shout out to John Corcoran of Rise 25 Media, because he introduced us, making this podcast today possible. And the second thing, this episode is brought to you by Mage Montreal. If a business wants a powerful e-commerce online store that will increase their sales, or to move piled up dormant inventory to free up cash reserves, or to automate business processes to gain efficiency and reduce human processing errors, or a company, Mage Montreal can do that. We've been helping e-commerce stores for over a decade. Here's the catch. We're specialized and only work on the Adobe Magento e-commerce platform. We do everything Magento: support, design, development, maintenance. You know someone who needs Magento services, we got their back. Email our team, support@magemontreal.com, or go to magemontreal.com. That's MAGE Montreal.com. All right, so Vinnie, thank you for being here today.
Guillaume, thanks for having me. Your energy is amazing. I love that you have this show, and I love the Rise 25 guys. So I'm so thankful we got connected. So thanks for having me today.
Pleasure. And please tell us a bit about yourself. You have a very nice, resume there.
Yeah, I'm most proudly a husband of 26 years to Debbie. And so we have 4 beautiful children. I'm sure every dad says that, but I'm like glowing. I'm raising little adults right now. They're all, 14's the youngest up to 20. And so I've been joking lately that my full-time job is being a dad, and my side hustle is running our 8-figure enterprise. And so it's just been that kind of life. And, I live in this e-commerce and digital world. I've had a wonderful privilege of having a few enterprises that have done quite well. I broke one tragically in front of the world and wrote a book about it, and I sold one, and here we are doing it again.
Okay, well, very interesting. So family life balance, maybe we can even talk about that later on. Would be definitely worth it. So let's start with what I said would be the main topic. So we fulfill that part of this discussion here. Like, what's the difference between regular accounting and e-commerce accounting, and how can this benefit an e-commerce business?
When I got rolling and selling products, I started, as you know, in your intro, I did web hosting, and it was selling really more of a service. It didn't actually have a physical product. The physical product was the server. But when I moved into e-commerce, consumer packaged goods, we ship a lot of things and we send stuff to people, which is natural. But in order to really make those businesses, really work effectively, you got to have some volume coming through the doors. And so in order to withstand the cash flow needs and the acquiring of the customer, well, there's so many transactions that fly through the door of that type of business. Well, we were running our health company, shipping out hundreds and some days thousands of bottles out across mostly North America. There were so many transactions going through that accounting and finance as we knew it didn't have the technology or the tools to really allow us to effectively operate a high transactions business with getting information as close to the day we needed it to make some decisions. And so when I looked into the industry to see if that even existed, it didn't. And so I'm like, gosh darn it, I'm a problem solution marketer. I need to solve a problem I had. So we set out to solve that problem. And next thing you know, we start doing it for other people. And here we are in our 7th year, and we're like this overnight success.
Yeah, 8 years in the making, overnight success.
Yeah.
So I like overnight success. It's always like a full lifetime of preparation as an entrepreneur, and then overnight success.
Yeah.
Okay, so you bring up some very interesting point. It reminds me also by something I was impressed with when I was on a cruise ship. They have like 6,000 guests, and their accounting is done like daily, and at midnight they adjust any special thing, and by 2 a.m. the next day, 6,000 guests, their accounting are done daily. It's like to the T, and it's perfect.
Yeah.
So I always thought it was an amazingly well-oiled machine. And what you're telling me here is that when you're moving up, you're scaling up in volume with your e-commerce store, you sort of have no choice to have better accounting, because otherwise you might be headed toward a train wreck and you don't even know it.
Yeah, I mean, the sad stats are 82% of companies closed for poor management of cash flow. And when you're running blind in a high transactions business, you know, when the furnace breaks, so to speak, you don't have the cash reserves to withstand the hit. And when you're running blind, you might make it, but the odds are extremely against you because it requires such fiscal management. And so we were a company that was running our health company. We had about an 8% profit margin. And when I found out we should have been around 20 to 23%, I became this ferocious animal who wanted my 14 points back. It wasn't really about the 8. We were razor thin margining. And so we attacked the leaky bucket because we got real information. I didn't need to be a financial expert. I just had them. But that gave me the access to dollars and cents every day so that we could drive down our acquisition costs, manage our inventory, and battle against acquisition costs of other competitors for just getting our good product out into the marketplace.
Oh, okay. Let's talk about that, because that's very interesting. You gave a very high level, super quick overview on this, but like going from 8% profit, like 20 something, it is huge because,
Yeah.
So you mentioned like fixing leaky bucket and a few things, but let's talk about that. Let's share a bit about this life story of yours. Like, how did you bring that company from 8% profit to 20 something?
Yeah. So I tell you, I wrote a book about this, and all of our guests, whether they're watching or listening, I want you to know that go ahead and pay attention to our stuff discussion. But I also want to give you a whole set of gifts because I want the difference between me and you is that I just have a whole team that does this, but you can do this if you want to invest the energy. So I want to give you all the resources to do that, including something I'm going to mention, our book. So if you go to fullyaccountable.com/ecommerce wizards, you will find all the stuff and access to all of our materials. All we're asked, drop in your email so we can get it to you, and we'll figure out a way to get you any of the information you want. But one of those things, Cam, is I wrote a book called False Prophets. The most important chapter, every book has a chapter, right? Most important chapter is chapter 2. And I call it Solving for X. I reversed the formula. I started and found out what our health company should be benchmarked against the industry. We have this benchmark is like where you stand against yourself and everybody else. And I found out that the type of model of business we were growing was about 22% was the margin. So I took that and ran it through a formula called Solving for X that I kind of scratched on a little notepad. I didn't really know what I'm like, all right, what's it going to cost me to actually get traffic? What's it going to cost for me to get the bottle in my hands to ship it to you? What's it going to cost for, to have the lights on? And I got all that information, and whatever was left between my margin and what I actually had left is what I could spend to acquire the customer. So that became the variable. My cost for acquisition became my variable, not all the other things that looked more like fixed cost. And when I started running the business like that, everything changed. We actually achieved that 22% margin. We actually had a business that wasn't razor thin on cash. We had just enough cash coming through back then before all that, where it was actually not that much fun to run. It was hard. It was wake up nights, wonder if you're going to make payroll. And as soon as we really started plugging in holes in that leaky bucket because we managed it from the bottom up, everything changed for us. And we just felt this massive burden to start doing it for everybody else. This business, Fully Accountable, we help a lot of people. It's hard because we're helping people with cash flow problems and growing amazing businesses. But I wouldn't want it any other way because we're helping a lot of companies.
And you're talking about something interesting here. Your cost of acquisition for customers became your variable, and you see that changed everything. So, what was the variable before that?
Whatever I needed it to be. So most of the variable, honestly, was cash on hand. So who could I pay? What vendor could I do? The variable was, all right, do I have enough inventory? The variable changed. So instead of making things that were constant, like I knew how much I was paying for my cost of goods, how much it was going to operate the fundamentals of the business. Once I realized that in this solving for X equation, I found out that for that model, that 40 cents of every dollar was my magic number for what I could spend to acquire the customer. And I found a lot of cases I was spending 52 cents on the dollar. In some cases, I was spending 34 cents on the dollar. But as soon as I removed everything above 40 cents, I found out I was just chasing revenue that wasn't helping us. And actually, that became like our wall. That when we made that our wall and we had to have a justified reason as to why we would spend above 40 cents of every dollar to acquire the customer, it actually allowed us to have sufficient margin to operate the rest of the business.
Right, totally makes sense. So you're shipping a product, or even if you're a service company, you have to pay salaries, or you have to pay the
Yeah.
physical goods, and you need a margin. It's you know.
And so
50%.
benchmarking is the key there, Ian, which is why I spent a lot of investment in building out our enterprise software for Fully Accountable, because what we do is we benchmark the company against itself and against its industry. So you know where you stand and you see where are you spending dollars the way you designed your business and how can you change those things? Because if you can actually focus on those elements, you can massively impact the overall net income of the company.
Okay, so you said that in your health business there, the benchmark was 22%.
Yep.
I'm guessing this is net profit after taxes, before any kind of interest, amortization, and EBITDA stuff.
Yeah, so we would say net income, right? So I'm not referring to EBITDA, right? Because that has some add backs and some other things, but we would shoot for our just raw, good old net income at the bottom
Right.
for 22%.
And that includes you've paid your taxes. That's what's left after paying taxes?
That's correct.
Okay, good. And do you have top of mind a few other like industry standards like this?
Yeah,
Like
actually, every industry has this. That's the beauty of it. Like stats exist. You don't have to guess at this. Like and so we've gotten quite good with hundreds of companies that we are able to internally benchmark based on your category. So if you're an agency, no different than, like what you guys do, we would know how your agency is modeled from a margin standpoint. Service companies have a different structure and their net margin. Product companies by category. So if you're just in a marketplace like Shopify or Amazon, you have a certain margin different from then if you have other channels in the way you acquire customers. So each type of model within the category they sit in can, for example, nursing homes have like razor thin margins at like 5%. And you could go all the way up to service companies that are north of 35% in their margins. And so you have these ranges, that exist, but you don't have to guess. It exists.
Yeah, so you got to access that data.
And the competitors of where you live in your industry, those are all real benchmarks.
Okay. And let's talk a bit more about this, because already reaching the seven figure, if you start from scratch, truly reaching seven figures is one hell of a journey.
Yeah.
I remember it took me like a decade. It was painful. And then let's talk about that journey from 7 to 8. You got me intrigued here. Like, what are the key things in your personal experience, if you share some of your personal stories, were the key factors going from 7 to 8?
Yeah, I think good thing for our audience to know is that, 6.94%. That's the number tracked of the amount of businesses out of all of the 28 million active ones that actually get to seven figures of revenue a year. So less than 7% of companies make it to $1 million. That's a big deal. I don't want anyone who's trying to do the work to get there. I'm not trying to skip over the 93% of companies that are trying to get to that number. Yeah. But the discussion for the people who are looking in seven figures and wanting to get to eight figures, there's two things. I think it's fair to say from going from 0 to seven figures, it requires an irresistible offer where the marketplace has proved that they want your product. When you get into that seven-figure category, you have an offer, just like Fully Accountable, that people want, and it's growing. And then you have to shift as the leader and change a gigundo habit. And you hear people talk about this, but the reality is the offer is established. You have lots of customers, but you're not doing that kind of revenue if you don't. In order to get from 7 to 8, it has to switch to the people internally and the processes in which you run as a company. And each stage from 1, 3, 5 up to 10 million, all of the improvement, the process, organizational improvement that has to happen within your people and in the way you run and optimize your business is actually the core focus. Because the reality is, as you continue to improve your service offering or your product, you have already established that customers want to buy it. Now, in order to stick around and really be able to get to that 8-figure, it actually requires you to do something you may not have signed up for as a leader. I didn't first time, was actually work on improving the business itself, not on necessarily adding more clients.
Okay, and let's split them up in whatever way you want. Let's say 1 to 3 million, 3 to 5, 5 to 10, whatever split you want. If you recall from your own story of personal growth there of the company, like what was the focus, let's say, when you went from 1 to whatever number you want, let's say 1 to 3 or something?
Yeah, 1 to 3, it's a big deal, right? So, you start adding personnel and you start adding some real numbers there. Well, then whatever things you bought, tools that were there for your people, you had two things you run up against. Either the people you hired were there running around helping you get your work done, and you might have, uh, uh, you might lack some talent on your team, where you might have to add some talent, or you might have to upgrade some of your people. They might have not been able to grow with you. So first and foremost, usually not a systems problem. It's usually a people problem. So what happens in that kind of scary range where, salaries are expensive and people are expensive, and that 1 to 3, most people run into a people problem first. Then in there, you actually have to make some investments because the system you run is probably being held together by duct tape and gum, and your systems are going to start to stress out when you get near those $3 million range. And so we had to do the same thing. We had to kind of grow up into another system. And that actually happens again at $5 million. Your people, your talent level has to continue to improve. And so for us, we spend our energies continuing to train them, really do what even you guys do in your organization, stick to our industry, because it gets a lot easier to train the people around you when you only do Magento. It gets a lot easier to train somebody. 1, 2, you can develop that expertise. 3, you don't have to go chase a whole bunch of resources that otherwise you may not need. I believe that niching down and standing for an industry is one of the most cost-effective ways to help an early stage 7-figure company break through some of the most expensive barriers as you reach that $5 million number.
And how many years, let's say, it took for that growth? We were talking 1 to 3 million. So let's go with that. 1 to 3 million. Let's say. How much time for that growth, that thing?
It's funny, that was our hardest jump. That 1 to 3, we kept getting up to like 2 million, then back to 1.5 million, then up to 2.2, and back to 1.7 million, and up to 2. We had an overhaul of some people at the executive level. We had some overhaul of managers. The part where we almost mentally gave up would have been in that 1 to 3 million range. When we broke over 3, for us as an organization, 5 and 8 figures, those were different things because we need to invest in it, but we actually stood through the endurance of almost breaking this for us. And I've seen it with a lot of companies. That 1 to 3 million is probably the hardest part of business as I've experienced it in the organizations I've run.
Was that even worse than the 0 to 7-figure or 0 to 1 million?
So the 0 to 1 million is mostly us, the people who start it. It's our side hustle ability to create an irresistible offer. Do you actually have something people want? The value proposition, right? To me, that's where all that energy is spent. You're validating whether you actually really have a real offer. Is there a value proposition? To me, that's an entirely different thing than actually building out a mature operation. I don't think it's hard. First off, in all fairness, the most think tanks would say less than 2% of the time someone hits it with a converting offer, 1.82% or something. So I don't want to be arrogant or dismiss how really hard it is to make an offer work in the marketplace to accomplish a value proposition. Yeah. But assuming that part is met, which is only 2% of the time, the growth part of building the business side is so ridiculously exhausting, especially for someone who may not have signed up to actually operate a business.
Yeah, especially you have often accidental founders in a way. You have a lot
Yeah.
of books about that. The great
Yeah.
technician guy or whatever, and it's fine. I'll just start a business. What are those clowns doing in management over there? And
Yeah.
finally, you realize that we're not that much of a clown there. It's very challenging.
And I'm
So
thankful to be someone who's created and had the privilege to create more than one working offer for value proposition in the market. And I recognize that that's a talent and this God given talent that I have. And I'm still thankful for that. And lots of people have some other talents. But, the gauntlet of growing a mature operation, it really takes one secret. And if I could give one secret away today, it would be you just got to outlast everybody.
I agree with that one. I agree with that one because there's so many hardships here and there. You will feel like giving up here and there, and life throws you a brick in the face. Everybody says it. Great entrepreneur like Walt Disney said it. Once in a while, life will throw you a brick in the face,
Yeah,
and that's that. Everybody lives that. It's
that's
true. You
right.
just need to not quit. Just keep improving, keep working on it, and
And
don't
that
quit.
is such simple but really hard advice to follow because every attack comes at you as the responsibility of leading that organization. And so if you're one of those people listening right now, I just want to encourage you that like tomorrow has enough to worry about. Today, stay footed where you are because so many people bail on what they want tomorrow to look like and they forget about.
Okay, so the power of now, present moment.
Yeah. And by the way, I am somebody whose mind is always worried about tomorrow. And I'm actually worried about tomorrow so much. I'm mad that it doesn't come fast enough. So I've had to spend my career really, really dialing into the benefit and gratefulness of today. And so I recognize my job is to be our kind of strategic visionary and look at things as how the market's going to move. And I'm thankful for Deb and the kids to help me stay grounded in the moment.
Yeah, well, everybody has a like personal path around that. But I did like Eckhart Tolle's book and like Michael Singer's book and so on
Hmm.
for to help with this kind of like to not always be living in the present or the past and to try to live in the now.
Yeah, I
It's
like
very
that.
challenging.
Extremely for someone the way the Lord's built my mind, it is. I am always drifting into the future. I have a great job of kind of not lamenting into the past, but there's a lot of my friends who struggle with looking at past stuff, and so each of us have our where we're on that. And so for someone like me who thinks in the future, I got to be careful about dreaming and not and actually making sure I'm executing and not over dreaming things that may or may not ever come into reality. And so if I dream too much, I get mad at what we currently have.
Right.
And for people who are stuck in some of my team or some even one of my founders, he gets stuck in the past a lot. And he's always like, well, we're not going to be anything more than this. And so wherever you are on that, my advice is just stay on it. If people want what you're doing, that's evidence and validation enough that it's working.
Right. And did you implement any kind of operating systems for the business? There are a few out there like EOS, Entrepreneur's Operating System, the Scaling Up from Vern Harnish, who wrote also the Mastering the Rockefeller Habits. Or did you have any kind of systems like this that you sort of implemented in a company?
I came to learn about some of that later in my career. And so what Gino Wickman wrote there at EOS and what Vern did for scaling up, great stuff. I highly recommend all their stuff. Uh, I wrote a book, CEO's Mindset. What interestingly, later on, I learned some language that my three owners, me and the other two, we fill each one of the visionary, manager, and technician roles. And so one of the massive secret weapons that a lot of people who know me are is I have an amazingly dynamic COO. Her personality is a perfectionist. She doesn't really want to be the one to come up with something, but whatever I hand her, she'll make it better. And it's amazing. And then my other partner is the technician that we built this around. And so that language that's kind of identifies those roles, we just happen to build that around that started with our partnership. And so we would have learned that terminology later. We just endured in our partnership and then built out the elements of our organization around it.
So in EOS term, you're the visionary, your CEO is the integrator, is going to make the stuff happen. And all this is built around an amazing technician that brings
That's right.
forth that technical expertise, or you could have a great scientist in a different kind of business or whatever like that.
That's right. And so then we would have built out that framework. And then as we were talking about it and doing it and living it out, which led to CEO's mindset, people were like, hey, have you ever read Gino's stuff or looked at Vern's stuff? And I shared a green room with Vern once and some speaking. And their stuff's amazing, and all of that stuff. And if you want, you have our link. You can have our book for free about kind of how I would have walked and built a 6 to 7 to 8 figure enterprise in CEO's mindset.
Right. Okay. So you were saying, let's say, if we go back to that 1 to 3 million growth path there that you were talking about, you say
Uh-huh.
it's mostly a people thing, and then of course you have to rehaul all your processes. And especially, let's say, a visionary in the business, you might have not signed up for spending so many hours just aligning your processes together. Say, I want to do the big vision stuff, the big relationship, the big things happening there. Um, do you remember any other kind of key elements that you've lived, that you've implemented, that allowed you to finally get out of that 1 to 3 million that you found so difficult?
The biggest thing that happened to me is I want to, one, be very fair that thank goodness for Rachel on our team, who's our COO, who loves processes, likes to improve things. So we have a wonderful weapon on our team. But one of the things that was huge for us, and this happens to a lot of entrepreneurs, not just myself, when I honestly looked at our business and why we were being held back, it actually was me chasing some other distractions that looked like good ideas for our business. See, distractions are usually not your bad ideas. They're your good ideas dragging you away from your core focus. And so when we looked at our business and we saw the 3 or 4 little things that I thought were clever ideas for our business, and they were good ideas, they were taking us away from our core. And when I put I took some honest feedback from the people around us, and then took the maturity to stop those things, that's when we actually really broke through all that. It was there. Our ability to do it was there. And I had to be honest and with great humility, that I was the one holding us back.
Right. I mean, generally speaking, almost all the other ideas that you have outside of your core focus are shiny object syndrome. In general, for everybody, I believe, for entrepreneur. But once in a while, there might be one of those true, um, powerful synergy idea, and that's challenging. Like, to know, is this another shiny object, or is this truly the next huge synergy to try to build something? But that doesn't happen often. You see it, let's say, with uh, Tesla and Solar City, and then the SpaceX stuff, or with Apple. It's easier to understand. You have that whole ecosystem being built. You start with the iPhone, and then maybe you want the watch, the iPhone, and maybe you want the iPad and the Apple TV, and they're creating that ecosystem that reinforces itself as it's
Yep.
building up. Um, but the question is, are you going to truly have something powerful that's truly going to have synergy like that? Or are you having a shiny object just distracting you from the core? And I believe there are some challenges there.
I'll tell you, one of the great book that I would encourage someone who would resonate as the CEO or the founder of their organization is Good Strategy, Bad Strategy by Richard Rummel. And continue to reread it. Richard writes, it's really intellectual. It's really requires you to pay attention to reading it. But his point is, it was what you made. There aren't a lot of, lasso the moon things that happen in a business. As a matter of fact, the opposite is true. You have to guard against chasing too many things that aren't that. And if you do, you have a greater likelihood of maybe discovering the 1 or 2 things that are the most innovative things. And so he gives you kind of a framework of how to think as that person with innovation inside of your own organization. And it really is a discipline more than just like this guessing stuff. And so strategy is hard work. Henry Ford said, few people critically think, which is why it's hard. And so, it's true. And and so I know my job is to do that. And when I actually got rid of what I call Andrew Carnegie's dribbles of income and really focused on innovation and strategy, is when really, quite honestly, and we're happy having it happen to us right now. There's a couple of things that have happened inside of our business that are extremely innovative. And the stuff we're doing with our enterprise software and benchmarks, it's going to rip the doors off again, another level of growth for us. And that happened because of taking away other distractions.
Yeah, there's a similar quote from Napoleon. Also, I'm paraphrasing, but like, thinking's the hardest of all activities, the most valuable, something like along those lines.
Well, he got that from Henry Ford, right? He's like,
well, the timeline doesn't work.
yeah,
He came first.
Maybe Henry got it from Napoleon. That's a good
I don't
point.
know.
It's interesting how all that lines up, but I
Yeah,
believe that that goes back even farther than them. I think
very
so.
likely, very likely. And I'm curious, like that Andrew Carnegie, you said dribble of income, getting rid of. I didn't quite get that. Like, what did you mean by that?
So interestingly, you all of us have seen things like the Pareto principle, where you put all your efforts, 80% produces, 20% of what you do produces 80% of your results.
Yeah.
And so what Andrew Carnegie would have added into his thing is there's always these clever little ideas that are true in business. 5% here, 3% there. The mistake is that what he learned as a leader is that those are the dribbles of income that take you away from 80% of your core. So what you have to do is be careful to not let those little dribbles come in and stay focused on your core. And if you can do that, then you have a greater likelihood of having an enterprise that's not only innovative, but sustaining.
Right. Yeah. And this is a lot of hard decisions because you say,
Oh,
yeah, we could be making money with this thing. Yeah, but that's a distraction.
I'll give you a great
It's
example. My company, every day we get people that want to sign up with us. But if you don't fit within the industries we serve, we say no. People are like, why would you turn down the revenue? Because I believe it's what's led to this amazing growth of our organization.
totally true. Totally true. Yeah. And which industry do you serve right now?
Well, we would say there's like six of them, but they all fit within this category. We say we speak digital, right? So e-commerce, also people call them consumer packaged good, technology companies, which also do software, tech-enabled businesses, and digital agencies.
Okay. So yeah, the digital world.
The digital
Okay.
world is where we live.
Okay, cool. And if anybody is above the $3 million mark, they're probably still left there on their appetite because we've been talking about 0 to 7 figure,
Yeah,
1 to 3 million.
yeah.
Okay, what's the next one? 3 to 5 or
Yeah,
something
so three
else?
to five. So some businesses can actually, depend on their design, go right in this thing where 3 to 5 and 3 to 10 can look very similar. And so to me, what happens to us now for the third time there, uh, you probably have to be honest with yourself that you created some innovation and a runway where you had a business that could get you to 3 to 5 million, and you kind of possibly ran out of runway. So it's time to take a deep breath and look at your business and understand what things either need to be removed from it so that you can actually invest more dollars in acquisition of customers because you have a substantially working offer. And so adding some new parts to the offering, what's interesting is big thinkers set up these 10-year strategic plans. And you know that less than 1% of businesses ever have a 10-year plan. They redo it. And so I think when someone's crossing over that $3 and $5 million mark, these businesses are having to look strategically at their marketplace. They've learned a ton, and they actually have to reset that strategic plan. It's probably the hardest thing to do, and it's the thing that size business needs that's going to get them up into 8 figure and beyond category.
All right, so that you either add or remove from the offering so that you can truly just scale the vertical of customer acquisition. So if this was a venture capital kind of world, you'd be saying, we're ready for VC, we're ready to scale up, everything is in place, the structure, the foundation is in place. Now is the time to scale up
Yeah,
massively.
deploy capital in the acquisition of your consumers, and so your margin will probably take a hit for a bit because that range in there is you're trying to get ahead and buy more real estate of clientele. That's right.
Right, and also, while we're talking about accounting today and finances, we might as well talk about this as well. So some businesses, especially those that are venture backed like this with huge capital, they often appear to be losing money if you just look superficially to their statements. And let's say we have companies like this, like Lightspeed, like a $10 billion stock valuation. But if you do the proper analysis, they're making plenty of money if you do an analysis per cohort. So you say customer acquired in 2017 are profitable at that amount, in 2018 by that amount, in 2019 by that amount, but they're losing money because they know that they're actually making money per customer per cohort per year, but they're just investing like crazy to grab shares of the market right now, and they know they'll make that money back after.
And I think that what principle should be there for us small business owners, right? There, I actually had the privilege to a good friend of mine, Roland Frazier, introduced me to the founder of LegalZoom, and I asked him a question. I asked him a question when we were alone, and then I asked him a question in front of a gigantic conference. What's more important, uh, growth or profit? And his answer was great. He said, if you're sufficiently capitalized, okay, go for it, growth. Otherwise, everyone else should be focused on profit, because if you're not, you're never going to get there. And I think small and medium owners got to be very careful about looking at sufficiently capitalized organizations who are playing such a long game. If you go try to play that game with your own bootstrapping dollars, you're probably never going to get there because you're going to run out of money.
That is so true. It makes perfect sense. And the growth, especially quick growth, sucks a lot of cash. Everybody says that. You can hear Vern Harnish
Yep.
saying it often. The entrepreneurial law of gravity: growth sucks cash,
That's
and
right.
because what
Well,
works
we're
with
about to enter another stage of that right now, where we know
yeah
we're going to have to invest a bunch of cash for this next, we're no longer the little guy. We can't play the David and Goliath story. And so some of our next growth will take the deployment of capital. And we're prepared to do that for ourselves. We're not really at this point looking for outsiders, but that an 8-figure enterprise, when you want to go play in a bigger level, you got to be able to look longer down the road, and it's expensive to do that.
Yeah, totally. And what worked at the previous level, like you were saying, will not work necessarily at the next. You might need to rehold the whole ERP, enterprise resource planning software, or all kind of other systems in the business. And the equilibrium of what's making you profitable at a smaller team now doesn't work with all the additional overhead you're adding, and you need
That's
to
right.
scale as well your revenue and keep that in balance and not getting a ton of customer anger. You know, so the service level
It's
quality
all of
stays
that.
there.
You take all of that, and then there's your secret to how to go viral with a video. No, I'm just kidding. Like, that's the reality of the secret to growing a business. That's complicated, and they each have their stages. I love how you framed these questions like through that journey. And one of the things I see often from our friends, Guillaume, is like everyone's focused on a version of a story that isn't the journey they're in right now. Like, so try to make sure the season you're emulating of a company represents where you are, not where you wish to be. This is going to really be hard to get there if you're not focused on the current season of what you're looking at, not season 3 of what you hope to be.
Yeah, that is so true, and it's difficult. And you also need to work on yourself, and very likely on your ego as well as an entrepreneur. I remember in my startup year, I wished to be like bigger, more successful, and whatever, and to be like already 3 step ahead of where I
Yeah.
was. But the reality was, well, I was a startup. I had not the money yet for an office back then, so I was living upstairs, and my living room was transformed into an office. So that
Yeah.
was year one there, and it's sort of to have to accept that this is the stage you're at, and well, one day we'll get to the real office. Took a few years. So it's step by step like this to truly accept where you're at and to really optimize for this and to work on this, and like don't try to flash, don't try to like be bigger than you are really, and all that. It goes step by step and it grows.
And all that's really hard. And everyone is like, you're the center of the world usually as the entrepreneur of everything around you. And you get all caught up in the hype of that. When we were rocking it with our web hosting company, even our health company, we were like these little internet rock stars. We were making a bunch of cash flow, and you get caught up in your own ego. And I'm thankful for some of the massive strikeouts that our public got to see. And because I think I'm acting as a better CEO today than I was capable of being back then with those enterprises.
Cool. All right, so let's talk a bit about your other business, because here you have a service company that we've been talking about, that
Yep.
figure for a while. And if you're a product company, it can be quite different with your living. So you said that your previous business was almost 9-figure, was
Yeah.
a web hosting
Yeah.
company. Like, what allowed you to say scale all the way to almost 9-figure? We're quite a way away from just 10 million a year for breaking the 8-figure mark.
Yeah. It needs to be said because everyone thinks there's some other version to the formula. But if you do not have an irresistible offer, you're not going to have that kind of growth. Well, we had one. We were able at that time, that configuration to build out a web building offering that allowed people to have a real-time flat 4-page site built almost on demand for them. We came up with the tech to make that work in servers before the concept of cloud even existed. We built this round robin thing. We came up with an offer to get that website out there. This is before all that tech existed. And we created an irresistible offer. And we were doing what part of a rocket do you grab onto safely?
Well, hopefully the seat inside the habitat.
I don't know. I just, whatever part you can hold on to. Well, that's what we had. Like, I'd walk into a conference room and we were hiring 25 people at a time. And we were like just going like crazy. And we had an irresistible. And I remember our like go month. We did like 214,000 in sales the month before. And then our go month, we did like 2.8 million in sales the next month. But listen, there's no system that's ready for that kind of growth. There's no like bank that likes you. There's no like way to methodically structure a business. And what I learned is that almost all businesses really grow at a 2 and 3x aggressive methodology. This rocket ship stuff, the unicorn things, it's all irresistible offer things. Super, super hard to get. And when you get one, you shouldn't do what I do and break the company. You should actually run it and hold on. And if you can get there and get out of your own way, because someone wanted to buy it from me. I was just so arrogant. I wanted to take it into 9 figures and I, in the process, broke it.
Oh my, okay. So that's the part of the tragedy that I didn't know about. So tell us about that story. What's the life story behind that?
We were just rocking it. We built some tech that worked, and I could get you some fancy programming terms around what was working for us and how we were able to densely put customers onto a shared server and all these cool things that tech wasn't there. And I just got full of my own crap. I'm on a list. You can look me up as bought one of the most expensive domains ever for purchase, and I'm on this list probably forever. And we just decided we were going to take our web builder and go build out that, and then let the shared hosting company be what it be. And in all of that arrogance, the board, and I was obviously the majority in there, we decided to hand off the leadership of our shared hosting company to somebody else. And in all that, what was discovered was I really hadn't worked at building a business around me. I was more of a lever puller than what was realized. And so in my, so to speak, disappearance from my own company, by the time I got back in and realized we were nosediving and what was this great enterprise, I ended up selling it for parts when we fixed it.
Right. So you weren't going for the peak, and then what would you have done? Would you have sold it when it was worth almost 9-figure in revenue, or do you think you should just not have stepped away from management, from day-to-day operations?
I think 3 things could have happened. I'm so thankful the one that did happen, and because I'm a far better husband, I'm a far better leader. I learned so much. So it was one of the most expensive PhDs one will ever get. I really don't look back and want to change a thing. But if I'm honestly assessing what could have happened in that moment, I think one of the 3 things you addressed could have happened. One, I could have accepted the letter of intent, sold it off for less, took some risk off the table. 2, probably even more importantly, we could have been maturing the operation behind us as we were growing and building stability there. And 3, I could have stepped out of the way and actually had some more effective leadership who wanted to focus on item number 2. So one, if not all 3 of those things could and should have happened.
Right. Right. It often happens when the founder goes away. It doesn't mean that this business will go well. You'll have another Apple, very often.
Well, you know what it was? It was all my hype and keeping everyone excited through all the hard stuff. When that got removed, when it required like the all that stuff to happen, well, it was the parts of the secret formula weren't fixed through process and improvement. And so since they weren't, what got exposed was a whole bunch of genie behind the curtain stuff. And even though that fall wasn't like a week, it was multiple months. It was quite expensive of the cash flow to fix our huge mistakes. So this is what started this whole idea of fully accountable, because we thought we were hosting is razor thin margins, but you get long time customers. And so we thought we were 5% profitable, but because we were so blind on our numbers, we were off. We were 5% negative. We had so much cash running through that we didn't know this gigantic tsunami that was coming behind us. And so my huge, it's so huge, people don't even believe me at times. Gigantic deferred bill to the IRS is what ate us alive. Now, thankfully, we didn't stiff anybody. We were able to pay all of our bills, but we just ate ourselves with arrogance.
Okay, so that lack of visibility in your true profit. So you're saying like day to day, I'm paying my bills, I have great cash flow, but your accrual accounting says that well, you're gonna be hit by a tsunami pretty soon.
Yeah, well, we owed $10 million to the IRS.
Oh.
And like we had business declining because the group that was now charged with doing that had no ability to do that right. And I'm off building off another venture with the dollars that I'm eking out of that business, acting completely arrogant about the idea that everyone should have a mid-8-figure company. And that perfect storm just broke it.
Wow, ouch. Yeah. And sometimes, you know, there's like that one idea that now hindsight is 2020. You see all the, you know, what it should have been. But like there's that the one concept, it's called Profit First by Mike McAllowitz.
Yeah, Mike.
You know, have you read that book?
Oh, I know Mike. Mike and I have
Yeah.
been on some shows together. He's great. I love how he's helping our industry. It's great.
Yeah, and see, there's that one idea from Profit First that like, okay, you put the profit aside first in the different banking accounts, so you don't touch the profit. And but you do the same with the tax account. So then you take the taxes and they're getting out of the checking account. So this way, even if the accounting is sort of a little late or whatever, we cannot touch that money. It's just been removed already, and whatever's left is what you're allowed to spend.
Yeah, I think
So
no different than Dave Ramsey, the way he talks about debt. I think in a very simple sense, what Mike's helping people see is in the basic function of running your business. Get those things away so you can't spend that money. So later on, you don't get nailed by it. Now it's a simple part of it. You got to mature above that as an organization starts to get a little bit more mature. But what a great principle for, again, if most businesses never see 7 figures, most businesses will never grow out of the simple advice that Mike offers.
that is so true. It is way safer, and some accountants or people will not even understand the difference. And what does it change? You're gonna if you put the expenses first, or if you put the profit first, what's gonna change? It's gonna change everything.
Yeah.
Because the psychological of human being, we're not robots. So you're gonna see that there's no money left, or there's that much money left in the checking account, and that's what you're gonna spend because you've put the profit and the taxes away. You know, as the first thing that you pay off,
That's right.
and makes a whole different psychological speak. Okay. Um, all right.
It's been a lot of fun, Guillaume. I really appreciate you're enjoyable. I can see why your audience enjoys your show. So I'm having a blast. So thanks for having me.
Oh, well, thank you. Same here. We're almost reaching the hour already. Any last thing you'd like to discuss before we finish?
I'll tell you, there's one thing that I think is interesting going on right now that's kind of on my daily life. Before all this like world shutdown and this health stuff we're all dealing with, right? The online acquisition and adoption rate to a consumer, most direct response companies and digitally based organizations, we're spending so much money to acquire a customer to convince them of adoption to buying on the internet. Well, in the introduction of the shutting down of our world, the consumer through technology was forced or told or shown how to buy correctly on the internet. We have sped up 5, if not 10 years of consumer adoption on the internet, which is amazing. And so my bit of advice to my fellow digital friends, before you would spend money just to beg people to show them that buying off the internet is safe. Well, that's been solved for you now. So now what needs to kick into gear as a consumer packaged good company is a thinking that profitability. It's no longer just getting an eyeball. They already know to buy. So you need to be focused on the quality of what you're giving them, as well as the profitability of how you're acquiring them. No longer do you need to convince them to buy from the internet. They already know how to do that. Now your mindset's got to change to acquisition costs and really how do you competitively bootstrap your business and play with the big boys and girls as it relates to competing correctly for your space.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. In the first 3 months of COVID, there was 10 years of progress for the normal pace of progress for the industry of e-commerce. So from March 2020, lots of sources have published studies on this, including the BDC Development Bank of Canada. So the growth for e-commerce was just incredible. So that, yes, there's that
And
mindset
our
shift now.
mind doesn't think that way. That oh my God, yeah, I still have this habit. Like I got to convince people to buy on the internet. I don't have to do that anymore. It's
No,
been given to us, and as a result of that, habits have to change. I'll give you we live this. A great example was we provide this outsourced solution that's fully accountable, right? And so our number one objection was always, oh my gosh, I love what you guys do. We'd love to have that in our building. Well, shut down the building for a chunk of time, and that's no longer our thing. No one says, oh, we need to have that in our building. So we had to change our thinking and no longer be like trying to defend against that objection because that objection's gone. Well, when you're acquiring customers as a product business, you have to get rid of this adoption objection in your head and your materials. That's no longer the issue. Now the issue has to be things like supply chain. Make sure you're managing your inventory correctly. Are you really re-engaging your consumer, because the re-engagement might be more profitable than the primary engagement?
yep, very true. The lifetime value of the customer and so on. A lot, not all businesses, but some businesses accept to go to break even with the first one and say we'll make money on the second order.
Yeah.
Of course, you need to know your number very well to go for that approach.
Amen there, buddy.
Yeah. All right. Well, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
During all this, we created an email, wecare@fullyaccountable.com, and we do care. So go ahead, drop us an email. We don't work with everybody, but if we'll help you. If we're a good fit, we're going to walk you down through our onboarding process. If we're not, we'll help land you somewhere. And you could just go to fullyaccountable.com and Vinnie Fisher at everything. You can find us. If you can't find us, you're not looking.
All right. Well, thank you for being here today, Vinnie.
Hey, thanks for having me.